The year is 1920. America has just navigated a world war and a global pandemic, and its leaders, in their infinite wisdom, decided the nation's biggest problem was that people occasionally enjoyed a beer after work. The solution? Simple. Just make it illegal. All of it. The 18th Amendment was ratified, a constitutional victory for the "we know what's best for you" crowd, and its enforcer, the Volstead Act, came along to lay down the rules. And what rules they were! The act defined an intoxicating beverage as anything with more than 0.5% alcohol. That's not a typo. 0.5%. Some breads have more alcohol content than that. So, naturally, non-alcoholic near beer became a thing. But brewers just sold the real stuff and told people to dilute it themselves. A brilliant start. The grand promises were, of course, utopian. Proponents like the Anti-Saloon League painted a picture of a sober paradise. Crime would vanish. Families would be healed. Jails would be converted into schools and playgrounds. It was going to be a golden age of clear-headed productivity and moral purity. This particular fantasy lasted for about 5 minutes. Almost immediately, the opposite happened. People didn't stop drinking, they just stopped drinking legally. And the government, faced with a population that refused to play along, didn't back down. Oh no! It doubled down, creating a tangled mess of laws so specific and strange, they read more like a surrealist manifesto than a legal code. This wasn't just a ban, it was an invitation to get creative. And Americans, from doctors to fake rabbis, RSVP'd with overwhelming enthusiasm. The first and most respectable way to get creative was, naturally, through your doctor. The Volstead Act kindly made an exception for medicinal alcohol. Suddenly, the American medical community discovered that whiskey was a miracle cure for an astonishingly wide range of ailments. The Treasury Department, which was in charge of this mess, even issued official prescription forms, Form 1403, allowing a patient 1 pint of spirits every 10 days. The nation experienced a miraculous surge in illnesses that could only be treated with liquor. Everything from indigestion, depression, and high blood pressure to cancer and old age suddenly required a prescription for old granddad. Pharmacies became the new saloons. The Walgreens chain, for instance, exploded from just 20 stores to nearly 400 during the 1920s, largely by filling these prescriptions. Doctors, who could charge $3 a pop for a prescription, had lines around the block. It was a perfect system, respectable, legal, and based on the very sound medical principle that if you want something badly enough, it can definitely be classified as medicine. While the sick were getting their medicine, another group experienced a spiritual awakening. Section 6 of the Volstead Act permitted the production and consumption of wine for sacramental or religious purposes. And just like that, America became an incredibly devout nation overnight. The demand for clerical collars and rabbinical certifications skyrocketed. Men who previously couldn't find a synagogue on a map were suddenly ordained rabbis, selling cases of state-approved kosher wine from their city apartments. Storefront churches popped up in every neighborhood, each with a surprisingly large thirst for communion wine. The government, realizing it had been played, tried to intervene. Federal officials actually sat down and attempted to calculate the appropriate amount of wine a family might need for religious rites, eventually settling on a cap of 10 gallons per family per year. This led to the glorious bureaucratic spectacle of the Department of Prohibition, trying to determine the theological alcohol requirements for the entire country. It was a beautiful illustration of a government trying to legislate faith and failing spectacularly. Because it turns out it's very hard to tell a man he's using too much wine to talk to God. When the loopholes proved too popular, the government moved from being an incompetent nanny to something far more sinister. A huge source of illegal booze was industrial alcohol, the kind used for manufacturing perfumes and fuels, which was being stolen and redistilled. The government solution wasn't better security, it was poison. Since 1906, federal law required denaturing industrial alcohol to make it undrinkable, usually with harmless additives. But under Prohibition, the chemists at the Treasury Department got creative. They ordered companies to add things like kerosene and pyridine. When bootleggers figured out how to remove those, the government mandated the inclusion of methyl alcohol, wood alcohol, a deadly neurotoxin. People started dying horribly. By Christmas of 1926, in New York City alone, dozens were dead. In total, it's estimated at least 10,000 Americans were killed by their own government's poison program. The response from Prohibition hardliners was essentially a shrug. Wayne Wheeler, leader of the Anti-Saloon League, stated, "The government is under no obligation to furnish the people with alcohol that is drinkable when the Constitution prohibits it." It's a stunning piece of logic. The law is meant to save you from the evils of drink, and if you disobey, the punishment is a horrific death by poison. For your own good, of course. From the deadly, we pivot back to the profoundly stupid. If you couldn't stop people from drinking alcohol, maybe you could stop them from making it? This led to a war on the very ingredients of fermentation, most notably grapes. But here's where capitalism found a way. California's grape growers, facing ruin, started selling grape bricks, solid blocks of concentrated grape juice. These bricks were sold with a very conspicuous, legally mandated warning label. The label would read something like, "After dissolving the brick in a gallon of water, do not place the liquid in a jug away in the cupboard for 21 days because then it would turn into wine." It was the most helpful warning in human history. Another product, a liquid concentrate called Vine Glow, was advertised with the guarantee that it would become wine if you just didn't follow the instructions. Thanks to this spectacular loophole, the California grape industry didn't just survive Prohibition, it boomed. Acreage of grape cultivation quadrupled. It was another beautiful unintended consequence. A law designed to stop wine production ended up creating the largest grape market the country had ever seen, all built on a nationwide wink and a nod. The federal government wasn't alone in its crusade. State and local authorities cooked up their own bizarre rules, extending the war on booze into the American kitchen. We're not talking about cocktails, we're talking about food. The Bureau of Chemistry, a predecessor to the FDA, was tasked with investigating products that might contain alcohol. This led to raids on bakeries for selling rum cake. It led to legal debates over whether brandied peaches or sherry-laced sauces constituted a violation of the Volstead Act. Mincemeat pie, a traditional holiday dessert often made with brandy, became a subject of serious legislative concern. Some temperance activists argued that these foods could give children a taste for alcohol, setting them on a path to ruin. It was the ultimate expression of the movement's core philosophy. The goal wasn't merely to stop public drunkenness, the goal was to scrub the very memory of alcohol from American culture, right down to the ingredients in your grandmother's fruitcake. The absurdity of federal agents worrying about desserts while gangsters were building empires says it all. With a nation of enthusiastic lawbreakers, enforcement became a kind of surreal performance art. Nowhere was this clearer than with the work of federal agents Izzy Einstein and Mo Smith. These two weren't your typical G-men. They were masters of disguise and deception, using their wits instead of brute force. They were, for a brief time, the most famous lawmen in America. Their methods were legendary. They posed as gravediggers, fishermen, opera singers, pickle salesmen, and even college football players to gain entry to speakeasies. Izzy, who spoke multiple languages, could blend in anywhere from a Polish wedding to an Italian bistro. And they were ridiculously successful. In just 5 years, they made 4,932 arrests with an astonishing 95% conviction rate. They confiscated an estimated 5 million gallons of illegal liquor. But their story is the perfect metaphor for the entire Prohibition project. For all their theatrical success, for all the headlines they generated, they were just two men bailing out an ocean with a thimble. Their antics made for great press, but they did absolutely nothing to stem the tide of illegal booze. It was a fantastic show, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So, after 14 years of this nationwide circus, what was the final score? The government lost an estimated $11 billion in alcohol tax revenue. It spent over $300 million on enforcement that clearly didn't work. The laws designed to reduce crime had instead created the most powerful criminal syndicates in American history. Al Capone, in his heyday, was reportedly making $60 million a year, an amount equivalent to over $1 billion today. The court systems were clogged, prisons were overflowing, and police corruption became standard practice. Most importantly, the law bred a profound and lasting disrespect for the law itself. When an entire nation decides a law is foolish, the law becomes a joke. Finally, in 1933, the country collectively woke up, admitted it had made a terrible mistake, and passed the 21st Amendment, repealing the 18th. It remains the only time in U.S. history that a constitutional amendment has ever been repealed. It's a fantastic story, not just about bad laws, but about the unshakable human confidence in our ability to design a perfect solution that somehow makes everything much, much worse. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!